Hey, we're starting a new series today called The Playlist, and we're sort of covering over the next 4 weeks, 4 songs that we sing repeatedly here at our church, and the scriptural underpinnings and the theology that kind of undergirds those songs. And there you just heard that one, which is well known and was written in the 19th century by a man named Horatio Spafford. Now, you've probably heard me tell this story before, but I'm going to do it again, and I've actually printed off sort of the background to this hymn and the lyrics of it, because we're going to a cappella this thing in a little bit. And so I feel like I'm in a classroom now. So we're going to pass these around. And so if you could take one and pass it down and pass it around, so everyone should get one. Thank you, Don King, my brother-in-law. There you go, Darren, my brother-in-law. And if you could pass these around, no joke. So pass those around. This song, as these are circulating, was written by, as I mentioned, Horatio Spafford. Who was Horatio Spafford? He was a successful lawyer who lived in the Chicago area and underwent great tragedy in his life. He was married with 5 children, a son and 4 daughters. And in 1871, that family, the Spafford family, lost their only son at the age of 2. I mean, so tragic. And 2 years later, the Great Chicago Fire hit. Now, he was an attorney, a successful attorney, but he'd also invested in various properties in and around Chicago, and those properties that he invested a lot of his money in were the ones that were the most hit by the fire. And so, loses his son in 1871, loses basically all his wealth in 1873, just 2 years later, and decides he and his wife they and their 4 daughters are going to move to Europe, where there was a couple opportunities, business opportunities that he was looking into, and they were going to move to Europe. So they had their travel planned, and he put his family on a ship to travel to Europe, and he was going to go with them, but he was delayed based upon a couple of issues involved with his property that was involved in the fire in 1870. The Great Chicago Fire. So he sent them along ahead of him, and he was going to follow up in a couple of days or a couple of weeks later. He learned that the ship that his family was on had sunk in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And furthermore, he learned that when his wife reached Europe, she broke to him the tragic news that all 4 of his daughters had perished in that sinking. And she wrote him 2 words, and I've included in there in the background of the hymn. She said, saved, about herself, saved, alone. Saved, alone. And Spafford, Horatio, when he got on the boat to travel to Europe to meet his wife, now they have lost 5 children in 3 years, and his whole business. When he approached the area where it was made known to him that his daughters had died, he wrote this hymn. And we just sang it. And now the hymn makes a little bit more sense, doesn't it? When peace like a river attendeth my way. That is when life is the way I like it, the way I think it should be. When peace like a river attendeth my way, but when sorrows what? Like sea billows roll. You see what he's alluding to? Whatever my lot, whatever comes in life in other words, what he's saying. Whatever my lot, thou, you, God, have taught me to say, it is well. It is well with my soul. And then that last verse is where I want to drill down on too. He says, and Lord, haste the day. We don't talk it like that anymore. We don't say, hasten up, children. We need to act with more haste. We don't say that anymore, but what does it mean? Hurry up. Hurry up. And so what is he saying? Lord, hurry up. Haste the day when my faith shall be what? What does it say? Tell me. When my faith shall be sight. What he's saying is, Lord Jesus, when you return again, hurry it up. Haste the day when my faith, what I hold to what I can't see, my faith when my faith shall be sight. Because do you know there's going to come a time, and he's basing this off 1 Corinthians 13, that when faith ends, there will no longer be a need for faith. Remember at the end of 1 Corinthians 13, it's read at weddings. Everyone thinks it's about weddings. It's not. And Lord, now these three abide. Remember at the end of 1 Corinthians 13? And now these three abide. Faith, hope, and love. And what? And the greatest of these is love. And we're thinking about, this is why it's read at weddings, is that the greatest of, between faith, hope, and love, between faith in God and hope in the future and love between this man and this woman, and the greatest of these is love. That's the stupidest interpretation I've ever heard in my life. And it's the most commonly interpreted. It's interpreted that way. And it means nothing to that matter. What it means is the love of Christ, the love of God in Christ is what it's talking about. So you can read it at a wedding, and I think it's good in that light, where it's what's going to be the undergirding force in our marriage is the love of God in Christ. You can read it then. But not as it's like between, oh, it's Mark and I, and the greatest thing in the world is our love to be together. That's not what it means. Faith, hope, and love. So why does Paul say the love of God in Christ is the greatest? He says because there comes a time when faith ends. And when will faith end? Faith is the hope and the conviction of things you can't see. You know what else 1 Corinthians promises us? 13? When we die, or when Jesus comes back, whatever comes first, he says, then we will be, in the Greek it says prosopon to prosopon. Literally face to face. Can you imagine being with Jesus face to face? That's the promise. Face to face. That's why I think Mercy Me wrote that song. I can only imagine. There will no longer be need for faith, right? Why? Because my faith will be sight. There's nothing to have faith in. I mean, he's right here. And Lord, haste the day when my faith, there'll be no longer need for hope. And so that's why the only thing that's left when we are with him forever is what? The love of God in Christ. So Lord, haste the day. Hurry up. And that's one of the last verses of the whole Bible, was it? Amen. Come, Lord Jesus. Come, Lord Jesus. Hurry up. And we should be praying that every day. We're ready, Lord. Hurry up. Because if you can't say hurry up and return to Jesus Christ, that means you're way too invested in this present life. You have too much engagement. You have too much hope and faith and love in this present life. Martin Luther was asked, if Jesus Christ was going to come back tomorrow, what would you do? It's an apocryphal story, but it's a good question for all of you. If you knew, which no one knows, because Jesus says no one knows the day or the hour when that will happen. So anyone who wants to tell you they know, they're full of you know what, because Jesus says no one knows. So if Jesus says no one knows, I take that literally as to mean this modern day prophet who's studied the book of Revelation and Daniel has concluded that the world's going to end in November, of 2000. There was a dude who was doing that like 2 years ago, wasn't there? Remember he said it was like October of 2015 or something like that? You want to hear something funny? It's totally off the script. Guess who called me about that? The News Tribune. Yeah, they called me and they said, well, you're a pastor of a church, and what do you think of this? I said, I'm going to be a really boring interview for you, because they want sizzle, they want spice. And they said, well, Pastor Shaw, what do you think about that? This guy is saying when the world's going to end. I said, it's going to be pretty boring because Jesus said no one knows. He's like, and then it got quiet on the phone. That's all I got. That's all I got. He's like, that's it? I go, that's it. He said, I'm not going to use you, But no one knows the day or the hour when Jesus shall return. But if Jesus Christ, if you did know, and he said, if I was returning tomorrow and you did know, what would you do? I bet some of you would be like, oh gosh, I'd hug and kiss my kids, and I'd go to church and I'd pray and I'd open up my Bible. In other words, you should be doing all the things you should be doing right now, dummy. That's the point. You see what I'm saying? Luther said he'd plant an apple tree. What does that matter if the world's ending tomorrow? He says, I don't think if Jesus came tomorrow, he should see me any differently than he's seeing me right now or the day before, the day before, the day before. I'd be loving my wife, loving my family, sharing the gospel, taking care of the earth. That's what I'd be doing. Nothing different. That's what our life should look like too. So, and Lord, haste the day when my faith shall be sight, the clouds be rolled back as a scroll. What does that mean? Holy smokes. Do you know Jesus promised in multiple times in the Gospels that when he returns, and that's what this fourth verse of the hymn is about, I think it's actually in reality the sixth verse, but we typically only sing 4 of them. When Jesus Christ returns, he's promised this, and I don't know what to make of this, but it's really cool to think about, that everyone will see him. He says, then everyone will see the Son of Man. And some will receive it with great joy, and some will what? Mourn. Oh no. They're going to groan. Why? Because everything that they've lived for and everything that they've hoped for and everything they put their time and energy and life into is utter, complete fake. And this is why C.S. Lewis says, do you want to know when the time is to come to Christ? It's even a flip saying. Fellas, it's time to come to Jesus. What does that mean? It's time to get serious. It's time to get real. Lewis says, now is the time to come to Jesus. Now is the time to kneel. Now is the time to put your hands together. Now is the time to speak to heaven. Now. Because you've heard me say this, some of you, but Lewis says, when he comes again, you're not going to get much credit for kneeling. Do you want to know why you're not going to get much credit for kneeling, Lewis says? Is because you're not going to get much credit for kneeling when it's impossible to stand up. Because the Bible says, and we're going to talk about that next week in this song, What a Beautiful Name. We're going to be looking at the scriptural underpinnings of that. What does Scripture say? That every knee will bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord to the glory of God the Father. So guess what? Everyone's going to bow to Jesus. Everyone's going to kneel to Jesus. You mean even my friend Rick? Yep. Even my friend Steve? Yep. Even my unbelieving neighbor, Susie? Yep. My kid? Yep. Every knee will bow. It just matters the only thing that matters is it out of willing and loving obedience? Or is it going to be out of, I have no other option? Please make it the first. The clouds be rolled back as a scroll. Can you imagine that day where all of a sudden the earth is shaken and the clouds are rolled back as a scroll? Like John Donne had a great poem entitled, he was a Christian poet, 18th century, What If Tonight Was the World's Last Night? I want to just take a time out and think about that. What if tonight was the world's last night? Because for some night in the future, it will be. And for some unforeseen date in the future, it will be for you. Maybe it's not Christ's return, but maybe it's the time of your departing. You're going to have a last night. And what if it's tonight? You know, some of you have been praying for my really close friend, Mike, who I coach football with, and he's a wonderful Jesus guy and has 4 kids. And I shared with some of you, if you were here Wednesday for that dinner, that he was 41 years old, 4 kids, was diagnosed with an 8-centimeter brain tumor about the size of my fist on his frontal lobe. He had a seizure at work, and then immediately they CAT scanned him, and they found this tumor. He was in emergency surgery, surgery within 2 weeks up at UW. That's how serious it was. And he, everything was fine until the tumor didn't have a lot of blood in it, so when it's about 70% of it was cut out, it reacted with a lot of blood to it. So it started to swell immensely. And then so that swelling started to funnel his brain into his brain stem. And so at one point he forgot what the day was. He was talking to his wife after the surgery. Then he forgot where he was. And then he didn't know who she was, his wife. And then he became unresponsive completely. and then he went into labored breathing. And the surgeon basically told his wife, we don't have time to even brain map him before surgery or anything. We just got to go now, and your options are, if we don't go do emergency surgery, he's going to die. Or he's going to be brain dead if we do the surgery. That's the most likely thing that's going to happen through the surgery. And they had to pull, they went into emergency surgery, which is what she chose, and they had to take a large chunk of his, I don't know if it's a large chunk, but part of his hippocampus out, which is where memory is lodged. And me and my 3 buddies, we are football coaches at Bellarmine. We went up there Thursday and visited him. So that's 2 brain surgeries in 3 days he had to undergo. And so now it's been like 7 days since that second one, and he's talking, like not in like long sentences, but like 3-word, like, hey guys, how's it going? He was able to say that to us when we walked in. Yeah, and there was one part that actually really disturbed me, because I think he knew who I was, because he talked, or the 4 of us were, because he talked about coaching. And as we're getting ready to leave, I leaned in and hugged him, and his head just looks like it's got a big zipper all the way around it, because he's, stapled up from the incisions. And I gave him a big hug, and then I watched another coach that I love so dearly lean over and kiss him on the forehead, and I was like, that's so cool, man, when dudes can do that. It's just, anyway, I hate macho men that are like, they don't cry, they don't admit love, they have to drive real fast and bang their chest. They're just such wusses. Right, Karen? And if you want to read any more about that, go read Freud. He had a theory on that too. It's a libido issue, is what he said. And then I prayed for us all. His wife was there too, and I prayed for us all. And we're like, all right, buddy, we're going to take off. And as we're getting ready to leave, out of the 5 of us who were there, including his wife, he looks at me and just stares at me for like 5, 6, 7 seconds. And I'm like, and he goes, you're pretty. I said, what? He goes, and he said it again. He goes, you're pretty. And I went, I'm totally insecure in my masculinity to begin with, and now I almost you meant handsome, right? You meant handsome. Yeah, I didn't say that, but pretty? No, I'm a man, so there I got my libido issues going on. What if tonight was the world's last night? Yeah, that got me thinking of Mike. What if tonight was your last night? The clouds be rolled back as a scroll. The trumpet shall sound. That comes from 1 Thessalonians 4:13-18. The trumpet shall sound. Now, what is Paul talking about? A literal trumpet? He's talking about what happens when royalty comes forth, when the time is now, when the VIP is coming through. The trumpet sounds. It announces the arrival of the King. The trumpet shall sound, and the Lord shall descend, and every eye will see him. Actually, I'll share you the passage where Paul treats this. It's in 1 Thessalonians 4. One of the earliest, get this, you guys, one of the earliest letters of the earliest pieces of literature of the whole New Testament. Paul says, brothers and sisters, we do not want you to be uninformed about those who sleep in death, so that you do not grieve like the rest of mankind who have no hope. Did you catch that? There's 2 ways to grieve. You grieve with hope or you grieve without it, but you don't get an option about grief. You don't get an option about grief. You don't get an option about suffering and pain coming into your life. It's coming. And there's 2 types of suffering, or there's 2 types of way of looking at suffering. One is you're in it and you're under it. The other is you look at the world and you get frustrated with the world, but you're not personally suffering. Like you read about a tsunami in Indonesia. You read about children suffering diseases. But you're not suffering it, but you look at it and you're upset by it. But point is, you guys, you don't get an option with suffering and pain. You're going to get it. This is why Luther said, you don't have to go hunt for a cross to bear. The cross you don't find the cross will always find you. And it will. And you know what? If you haven't experienced great suffering, you're probably about 16. It's coming. And for some of you, unfairly, it's going to come way more than the average person. And it sucks. It does. And there's no other word to give to it. And you're going to get it way more than everyone else, like Job. And you may say, well, why? I don't know. That's the theological answer. That's not a throw my hands up in the air answer. I don't know. And that's from the Bible. We don't know. Remember, God never told Job why he was suffering. Even though we as the readers know, it was this weird bet he had with Satan. But Job never got privy to that. But we knew, but he didn't. And so it's analogous to, like in the military, where I'm stationed at now at Pearl Harbor. When I go out to Hawaii, there's this room that it's like behind locked doors and it's coded to get in. And I saw a guy go in there and I'm like, I'm the chaplain. I'll go wherever I want, right? And I'm like, I knock on it. I'm like, I want to come in. What's going on in here? and I actually knew. But they're like, you can't come into this room. I'm like, I have a secret clearance, which I do. I have secret clearance. And then obviously you're told what? You're cleared to be here, but you don't need to know. See, there's a need to know basis. Yeah, you're cleared to hear this information, but you have no need to know it. And that's what Jesus tells it. That's what Christ's word is to us. That's what our relationship to God is. Why about suffering? You don't need to know. What's your job? And by the way, the people in the history of civilization, the culture that has struggled with suffering the most is 21st century Westerners. People in past cultures haven't struggled like we struggle with suffering. Do you want to know why? And this is going to hit close to home. Because we're materialists. We think this life is all there is, so we base all our hope on this life. On our investments, on our jobs, on our romance, our relationships. We put so much stock into that because it's not that we don't believe there is a God. It's just, as one philosopher wrote, it's just our belief in God is just so darn thin. There's just no substance. There's no oomph to it. There's no girth. There's no breadth. And so we invest everything, our energy, our time, our thinking, our loves, our hopes, our aspirations, our dreams. They're all in this present world. And when this present world takes a hit, when suffering comes, or when that's interrupted, or when dreams are shattered and hopes are broken, we get shattered and we get broken because we're so materialist in this present world, in our school or in our jobs or in our loves. And when that gets hit, we get hit really hard. We're the only cult. This another social psychologist that I'm reading is like, you have the unfortunate position and luck of being born into the worst culture in the history of humanity as regards to how to deal with suffering. So look yourself in the mirror and say, it's not even your fault. You are what you are. I tell our football players that all the time. It's not your fault the way you are, not collectively, but a couple guys. Hey, you're in a culture that emphasizes selfishness. You're in a culture that is materialistic. It's not your fault. But what is your fault is how you respond to it. That is your fault. And do you want to know if you have way too much investment in this world, there's a telltale sign. I'm not going to tell you. No, I will. This is a telltale sign, and literally, you guys, it never fails. And it deals with our subject matter, like Horatio Spafford. When extreme pressure comes upon your life, Martin Luther, who lost 2 children as well, called it getting pushed to the borderland of yourself. If, let's say, this stage is who you are, and when suffering and pain and pressure comes, you get pushed to the border of yourself. You get pushed to the edge. And when you get pushed to the edge, do you know what happens? The real you comes out. C.S. Lewis gave the analogy of rats in the cellar. He says, if you want to find, let's say your spirit is a cellar, Do you want to see if there's rats in there? He says, would I find out if there's rats in there, and if I go down into the cellar and I'm banging pots and pans and stomping as I go down, and then I flip on the lights, am I going to see any rats? No. Why? Because they've scattered. They all knew it was coming. But what if I was stealthy and I go down quietly down the stairs? Bam! Flip on the lights. What am I going to see? Rats scurrying. That's why Lewis says that when unforeseen pressure comes or unforeseen circumstances or pain, and it pops into your life really quick, that's the real you. When you say, oh, well, I wasn't expecting it, or I was tired, or I was hungry, or, oh, I can't believe, I wasn't ready for. Stuff we all say as excuses for our behavior. That's the real you. There's the rats. It's the sudden, unprovoked, right? It's sudden. It's quick. That's when the gunk's going to come out. So if you want to see the real you, pain and suffering or pressure will surface it. And that's, so as a pastor, I get to sit with people in pain and suffering a lot. And remarkably, it always surfaces what we're really living for, what we're really placing our hope in. It always does. It's amazing, that perspective to have. I guess it's one of the things I never even thought about with this calling as a pastor, is that you get to see this. You get to see if someone's prideful and they go into a situation where death or suffering is involved, that pride just gets amplified 80 times more. If someone is cheap, or when they get pressure or put upon them, that stuff it just comes right out. If there's a conflict between a son and a daughter, or a brother and a sister, and that's sort of laying dormant, the pain and the suffering it goes right to the top. Isn't that weird how that works? But it does. And in this position, it's so cool and depressing, I get to see that in people. If someone is faithful and they trust in Christ, and pain and suffering comes, that faith surfaces right up to the top. And you could see it, and it's visible. I've seen funerals, you guys, that I've done that almost border on joy. Because of who Jesus is and what Jesus Christ has done. I just got to do one a couple months ago. John Lindstrom. I'd say not only someone I was his pastor, but he was my friend. That one bordered on joy. Because Jesus was so with him, and he knew it, and he trusted him. It was almost joyful to commend a brother in Christ into the loving arms of Jesus. It was an honor, it was a privilege. I was almost excited for it. And then I've seen others on the other end, where a loved one is lost, and the family just goes to pieces. And do you know what that surfaces to me when I see that? They're no good to each other because they're all going to pieces individually, and they're mad and sad, and what's weird is too, here I never knew this until I got in this position either. Super weird. I'll just let you in a little bit on the weirdness of this job. That I've done funerals for people that, and I love to do them because I love sharing the Lord in those situations, but where people are angry with me and I haven't even met them. Isn't that weird? There's a coldness, they're brusque, trite, and kind of almost rude, and I'm like, I've never even met you. But see, what I figured out is they're responding to suffering by placing it on God in a way. You see? And they that's my point. You're always going to get suffering and pain. It's coming. It's the response that Scripture wants to help you with. You know how the Greeks responded? They're one of two ways. And outside of Jesus Christ, I know of no other two. Here's the two ways. Well, I guess our way, the materialist way, where we just go to pieces and put our heads in the sand. That would be the American way. Oh no, life must be wrong, I'm suffering. If it hurts, it's wrong. It's like, no, the greatest hurt in the world was for the greatest right. It's called the cross. When it got more hurtful to Jesus, the more he leaned in. And for us, if it hurts, it's wrong. I forgot what I was going to illustrate right there. What was that? 2 ways to respond. 3, the stupid American way. Okay, here's the other 2. The 2 ancient Greek ways. 1, you could be an Epicurean, which is what I would be. What's an Epicurean? You only live once. So what does that philosophy mean? Eat, drink, be merry, party, have sex, go wild, go crazy, because you got to experience everything this life offers, because this life is all there is. So you better go and go nuts. That's the Epicurean way. I would do that. The Stoic way was, don't put your heart into anything, don't invest into anything, don't love anything, don't hope anything, don't care about anything. That's why they say, oh, he's so stoic. That means removed, right? You're robotic. Why? Because why don't you invest your heart into anything and love anything? Because it's inevitably going to be broken. When you love someone, this is why I don't even like getting pets anymore, because it's so dang hard to let them go. That when you love something, you have to know that there's an end date on that. We got anyone who's married in here? Raise your hand. And I'm one of them. Guess what's going to happen? One of you is going to have to look the other person in their eyes when they're in a coffin. Okay? That's a reality. Take it to the bank. It's going to happen. So you know what happens? People, they shy away from investing into relationships because it's going to hurt so much. This is why people who have been scarred in relationships, they don't reinvest in a new one, even though it's a different guy or a different lady, but they don't want to because they've been hurt so much in the past. And so they take the Stoic option that I'm not going to. Did you ever know that your relationship strategy is thousands of years old by Greek philosophers that knew about it? I'm not going to get involved. I'm not going to invest because it just hurts too much. You know, that's the Stoic option. You know, that was what C.S. Lewis chose. Let me tell you really quick before we close. Isn't this hymn great? This is all from this hymn. C.S. Lewis, my patron saint, even though I don't believe in saints, but I do believe in saints. Anyone's a saint who looks to Jesus Christ and trusts him. I don't believe in special saints. So, by the way, God doesn't either. So Lewis, when he was a little boy, he was about 9, so he's about my son Luke's age. Luke and Eli, about their age. His mom was stricken with cancer. And he was devastated, and he prayed, 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 and she died. And his response then was, even at the tender young age of 9, was to hell with God. So he became an atheist. That's how atheism usually is generated. Did you know I read a book on doubt? And an empirical study, psychological study, and 85% of doubt is emotionally based. Do you know what that means? It's not based upon, intellectual problems with the concept of God. No, I have an emotional reason for not wanting to believe in God, so I go search for intellectual reasons to support my emotional. You have the conclusion already, and then you go look for intellectual reasons, and then you tell people you have intellectual problems, when actually it's an emotional reason that was finding intellectual reasons for the emotional response. A little bit confusing, but you get my drift. So Lewis has an emotional response, then he becomes an intellectual atheist based upon his emotional response to his mom dying. He ends up being converted to Christianity, falls in love, gets married to a woman who, when Lewis is like 60 years old, gets married to a woman who's terminally ill. They get married. They didn't marry for love. It was to give her citizenship in Britain because her visa was expiring, so she could stay. And they got married, and you know what happened after they got married? They fell in love. Her name was Joy, which was the most ironic thing to Lewis, because years before, when he was converted to Christianity, he described that feeling when your soul sits right where it should be with God, when Jesus is Lord, when God's grace is operative, when his love is operative and not our selfishness. He called that experience of God joy. And then dozens of years later, who does he meet and fall in love with but a lady named? Is that nuts? She ends up dying of cancer too. So his mom and his love. And Lewis wrote, to love at all is to be vulnerable. Love always requires vulnerability. To love at all is to be vulnerable. He says, if you want to keep your heart intact and not have it be broken, this is what you have to do. He says you have to tuck your heart safely away into the coffin of your selfishness. And he says, and don't give your heart away even to an animal. Don't give it away to anyone, he says, and it won't get broken. But do you know what will happen inevitably? It will become unbreakable. And you'll have a hard, cold, lifeless heart. To love it all is to be vulnerable. And this is what he wrote towards the end of his life. He said, so why should anyone love if losing hurts so much? This is right before his death. And he said, I have no answers anymore. The great apologist, the great defender of the faith says, I have no answers anymore. The only answer I have, he says, is the life that I have lived. Twice in my life, I've been given that choice. As a boy and as a man. The boy chose safety. What does he mean when his mom died? I chose safety. I chose to say no to God. I chose to be stoic. I chose not to be vulnerable. I chose to just push away all the suffering and pain so I don't have to deal with it. The boy chose safety. He says, the man chose suffering. The pain now is part of the happiness then. That's the deal. To love it all is to be vulnerable. There's the Stoics, the Epicureans, how do you deal with suffering? Or it could be the Christian way, which is Horatio Spafford. When peace like a river attendeth my way, but when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. Check this out. The Christian answer, or the Christian way of looking at this, it's not Epicurean, is it? Eat, drink, and be merry, for this life is all there is? Of course not. And it's certainly not the Stoic response, is it? Where you don't involve yourself in anything lest your heart get hurt or wounded. It's certainly not that. It's neither. But you know what's crazy weird? I thought of this at first service when I was talking about it. The Christian way is both. It's, yes, you can eat, you could drink, you could get into relationships, you could love, and you could hug and kiss and cry and invest. Yes, do it. And then the Christian life also says, but there's a greater love, there's a greater hope, there's a greater, so those things don't define you. There's a greater hope beyond this. And so there's an element of like otherworldly stoicism to it as well. It's both. Hey, and by the way, there's no other way of looking at the world other than those four ways. There's the Epicurean, there's the Stoic, there's the nihilist, materialist, secularist way, and then there's the Christian way. What other way would there be? Oh, let's say the fifth one. Self-salvation way. Yeah, you worship yourself. There's a self-salvation way. Like, for instance, Buddhism. Hey, deal with suffering by you better respond well now so you get a better life later because you're suffering this because your previous life you were terrible. There's that way. Americans use that term too. Do you know it's called karma? We say that too. And some of us actually believe that, which is so moronic. But the Christian way, what is it? In any and every circumstance, what does Paul say? I've learned the secret of being content in all circumstances. I could do all things through Christ who gives me strength. And do you know what else? The Bible gives one word to our suffering. In 2 Corinthians 4:17, do you know what it says? The Bible calls it temporary. That's so beautiful, isn't it? And this is where Lewis got the title for one of his more famous books. For the slight and temporary affliction is preparing us for a weight of glory beyond imagination. He titled his book, The Weight of Glory, the sermon. it's temporary. So we say. What? Huh? Lord, haste the day when my faith shall be sight. The clouds be rolled back as a scroll, the trumpet shall sound, the Lord shall descend, even so it is well with my soul. I want to sing this right now so bad. And we're going to do it a cappella, and I'll start us off. I don't have a good voice, but I don't really care. I'm hard to embarrass. So we're going to do verse 1, you see right up here, verse 1, and then we'll go, and then the last one, and the lyrics are a little bit different than we use, but just go with what's on the paper. And then let's do the refrain. The refrain goes, it is well with my soul, it is well with my soul. Okay, let's start the first verse. Hey, and let's do this. Let's sing this as if it's our song, that you wrote it, that it's your prayer, that it's your song. What's that? Do I have to what? Turn on the lights. Oh, let there be light. When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever I want, thou hast taught me to know. It is well with my soul. Last verse. And Lord, haste the day when my faith shall be sight. The clouds be rolled back as a scroll. The trump shall resound, and the Lord shall descend. Praise song in the night, oh my soul. Let's do the refrain. Amen.